That's better. Don't know what happened, but something happened. Yep, I've been having a couple of issues recently. Still don't know what caused that particular cut off there, but it certainly wasn't the internet connection. Though I do need to reconnect to the chat on the other device that I'm using. So, if you'll give me 1 second. I am still here. I don't know if you can hear me. You should be able to. What the balls is going on? I do have a connection. Just one of the devices isn't working. There we go, it should be back now. I need to know if you can hear me or not, so if you can let me know in chat, I would appreciate it greatly. Can you guys hear me? Oh, cool. Thanks for letting me know. I'm going to go and open a window real quick, because the room that I'm painting in, the boiler's in here. So it gets really warm really quickly. There we go. Sorry for the noise. Should probably pick up my phone case too. There we go, that'll live there for a sec. Clean this brush, dry it off slightly. Get a touch more brown. Touch more water. Mix that shit up good. Close the pot and continue doing what I'm doing. Now, I don't know where it cut off, but as you can see, I've continued painting this bracer. While the connection did a little fucky wucky. And I've got most of it coated in that lovely chocolate brown that I was using. If anybody's interested, I will drop the names of any of the colours that I've used, if you just let me know what colours you want to know. I'll be honest, most of them are Citadel colour range. You can find most of them in your local hobby store or art, well, not really art supply stores, but yeah. Most hobby stores will stock Games Workshop paints. Just because they're a really popular choice in paints. Right, so there is the tone of the bracer. It's very dark, but it does stand out against the black slightly. Oh, ignore the little cut on my hand, by the way. I don't know where it came from. Absolutely no idea. It's one of those things, sometimes wounds just appear on me and I don't know where from. I've usually scratched myself or something in the night, or knocked it against something and not realised. Right, let's get going on the other bracer. Nice thin coat, staying between the two raised areas of the bracer on either side. As I said last time, these are just base colours that I'm laying down at the minute. They'll be detailed with some highlights, some lowlights, and a hefty great deal amount of shading, which I'll be doing today, if time allows it. And depending on what you guys want, I might either continue painting this for the entire stream or move on to a quick build or two. I can't really do a poll as I'm not an affiliate. The affiliate system just allows people who stream more regularly to earn money on their streams. Right, now that they're based in, what I'm going to start doing is, I've got a colour that I've missed out on the sword there too. And I should probably touch up the colour on the belt. What I'm going to use for the hilt of the sword, not the hilt, the grip of the sword, to make it stand out, is this really dark pink. Move my dude. Just on the wrap of the sword. This one's dripping out of the pot a little bit. Oh, that's coloured the water lovely. Spam 1 and 2 what? Let's get a touch of this down. Alright. Well, we'll see where the evening takes us, shall we? Nearly knocked my light over. I don't have a great deal of area to work with. Yeah, you see the white areas of the sword here and here? Just going to touch those up with a very dark pink. It's not that it flows from the top, it's just a dropper lid. They're designed to hold a small reservoir of paint that you can draw from without dipping your brush into the entire pot. Now this bit I will need to concentrate for because it's a really small amount of detail. And I've got far too much paint on my brush. I need a smaller brush. Let's swap to a little bit, something a little bit tiny. There, that didn't taste great. Switching now to a focus, to a 000. A brush that is so tiny that you've got to zoom into the detail where you can see my fingerprints to see the bristles. Get just enough to coat the bristles, and let's continue. Just gently touching the bristles against it. You'll notice I use the sides and the edges of the bristles a lot more than I use the tip. No, I can't go much smaller than this. This is actually the smallest brush that I own at 000. going any further, I'd have to take one of my own hairs out and start painting with that. Let's get that just under the grip that he's holding the sword in. Me? Quite a lot, as you can see. It's just practice over the years. I've got fairly steady hands. But that's what comes with being an archer. Steady hands and strong shoulders. This is the much more awkward one. Top half. Don't have enough water in the paint now. And because it's so warm, the paint's already starting to dry up. I'm always painting a well ventilated and cool area, guys. I don't know about Germany, but air conditioning isn't particularly common in the UK in homes. Well, I could do that. It depends on the line I've got to do. If I need a really thin line, I'd be willing to. Problem is, my hair's really long, so I'll have to use a beard hair instead. You know, let's give you an actual example of how small this brush actually is. You saw it against my fingerprints, but here's a human hair. There you go. That's a human hair, and that's the size of this brush. Cool, that's nicely blocked in. Just going to touch up that bronze a little bit, well, copper. There's a very small spot of white where I've missed it. So, you know what that means. A wee touch of copper. Put that back down on there. Just as wee touch of water. Get the bristles into a nice point. Pull them down and twist the brush. Oh no, Germany's actually much hotter than the UK. Especially in the summer. We're a very, very mild country. The hottest I see in my area, usually in the summer, is somewhere around 27 to 29, usually. That's the average. We do see higher, obviously, sometimes. There's freak weather. We've had up to 32 degrees. But not much higher than that. Need a little bit more of this pink too. There's a spot or two where I've missed just a little bit. So, bristles aren't fine enough for this just yet. Let's brace myself against myself, just touch into there. Little touch there just underneath the grip. On the rear side, nope, that's cool. On the inside, yep, just a little touch there too. Of course I'm ready from the UK. I'm might joke around saying I'm from the internet. I say I'm some kind of digital cyber construct made of pixels and several other things, all nefarious in origin. Right, well that's the pink done with. So while we wait for that to dry, what I'm going to do is grab a selection of shade paints, which are much thinner and there's not as much pigment in them. Which means when I go over stuff like the gold or the silver or even the black armour, it'll put just a nice bit, a little bit of definition over the top. Then I'll bring the gold up to a much brighter, cleaner tone and leave the deeper recesses dark from the shade. And from there, well, we'll see where we go, won't we? Now, let's get a nice mess of this paint onto the palette using a medium shade brush. Yes, this is a medium brush. And as you can see already, it's a much thinner, almost transparent paint. Had to move the figure out of the way because the focus was sitting on him rather than on the palette, which is what I needed. Need a big puddle of this because you burn through it like nothing else. Yes, it's a wash. It's very much similar to a wash. The problem with washes and shades alike is that if there's any defects in the figure, as there is quite a few in this unfortunately, it'll highlight them. So you've then got to paint to hide them. But the good thing about them is it brings out all of the detail. You just don't want it to pool in certain areas like here. As you can see along this tail here, just where I'm pointing, there's some fairly deep recesses under the raised scales. So if you let it just settle there, that whole area will look darker than everywhere else and look out of place. So you've got to be quite careful and move the shade around. Just distribute it evenly across the whole thing and move on to the next part. Which for us tonight, I think the next part is going to be the feet. Cool. Who have you been watching? People who are much better than me, I assume, as I'm not particularly good. I'm just a hobbyist at the end of the day. I don't do this for a profession or for anything like that. I do it because it's fun. You can do it with a dirty brush too. You don't have to do it with a clean brush. As long as there's not too much paint on it, you should be able to soak away the excess shade. See, if I just do that on the foot, and that's where it's pooled. If you look at the other foot, that's shaded. But the other one, there's a big dirty pool of it. So you've got to just draw it away ever so gently. Touch it into the gaps between the toes so it's more definition. Go around underneath the bottom of the palm of the foot and up the heel. I tend to shade under the feet quite heavily so it looks like there's more shadow. I'm not even an artist. I'm a hobbyist. You know what? I'll paint this onto the dark grey so you can see the effect that it has. If you look there on the foreground, it brings up all of the detail in the base. Now from here I'm going to need a little bit more of this shade, so soak up a lot from the pot, dump it all onto the palette, squeeze it out, hey, well, I thank you for your compliment as much as I don't believe it. Alright, now there's a bicep hidden there, so let's just touch the tip of the bristles to the bicep, add some definition, go around the other side, do the same, I hope I'm at least helping you guys with a few of these techniques if you don't know them, and if you're going to start out painting miniatures for any kind of tabletop scene. I fight it because I'm not an artist. I don't believe I'm an artist. I'm a hobbyist at best. Just to inform you, Jiro, the three that are in chat with you at the minute, C, Kane and Lily, they are three of my friends. All of which are in the Pathfinder game that we play every Monday that this character's from. Yeah, the chat seems to be really behind, judging from the comments. Just got to shade the head now. Unfortunately, a lot of the detail of this miniature has been lost in the print. But hopefully this should pick some more of it out. Wow, I see how it is, Lily. No, I get it. All those years mean nothing to you. Absolutely nothing. I get it. I know what I'm worth now. Let's try and get a deeper shade in the recesses in these tendrils. Move some of that away. Clean this brush off. Grab that piece of tissue again, dry the brush again, and soak some of this out. All you've got to do is very gently touch the tip of the brush to the area and it should soak some of it out. But yeah, as you can see, there's already a lot more definition in the gold. Well, you can't quite see it yet. You know what, you should be able to see it on the tail better. Now, while that dries, because the washers take a long time to dry, usually around half an hour depending on the heat, I'm going to look for a different wash, a completely different shade that I need, and hope that I've got. Is this my shade paint drawer? 'Tis not. That's my shade paint drawer. There we go. Nice fresh pot of black shade. Now this will dull down the armour a lot, but I'll bring it back up with some touch, choice highlights and layering. This is a black shade, so it will look a little bit different to the one I've just been using. Need some more tissue because that piece is all used up, and I just knocked something over and I don't know what it was. Here we go. Nice clean piece of tissue. Time to dirty it up. And then soak up all of this oily black shade. Cool. My Gex, I didn't think you thought about me that way. Taking me to bed already. You could have at least bought me dinner first. Clicky lids. Help, I've got paint on me, I'm all messy. Right, now let's get this big sloppy shade all over this black armour. I'll work down from the chest. The area where you'll see the most impact of shade is going to be on the cloak. I've just got to decide what colour shade to use on the purple. I might actually just use the black shade over the purple because it'll give it a nice contrast and shadow. The problem is, with shades specifically, is they dull down any metallics and make them quite matte. Hey, what's up Lara? How you doing today? This is going to be a little bit different to how you've seen me usually. A lot less chaotic and gremlin-like and a little bit more chill. And that's both pauldrons done. Let's do around the side of the waist here. Just touch this shade in. And then work it down the legs. Don't take that the wrong way. Or do, I don't care. Just don't report me to Twitch for it. Yes, this is my personal character that I play in the Pathfinder game I've told you about. This is my Dragonborn fighter, Nariax. Here's his old figure that I decided wasn't good enough anymore. Need to move the new one out the way. This is the old one. I didn't really like the figure when I bought it. I just needed a better figure. I needed a figure. So, I took a nice long while trying to decide on a figure, and I found this one. Bought it, and that's now who I'm working on. My character doesn't use a falchion, but that's fine. Doesn't use a flail either, but he had one in that figure. They don't have to be perfect. We play on Roll20, so it's not like I get to use the figure in the game anyway. It's just for my own personal satisfaction. Now, I was up to just past the armour skirt. Let's get them booty cheeks painted. At the minute, I'm just shading down the armour. I got this online on Etsy, actually, funnily enough. It's a 3D print. The other one I got from a local game store, and it's an official Wizards of the Coast one. But unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be buying any more Wizards of the Coast products. Just given on their whole input on the current court case that I won't bring up on stream. Oh, Hero Forge is great. It's just they don't really have a whole lot of, well, they don't have a great deal of choice for parts and pieces. Well, they do, it's just they didn't have the parts and pieces I wanted. Etsy's a great source for miniatures. I've got a big old patch of white there that I've missed on the inside of the thigh. So give me 1 second while I fix that. Put that brush down and get a touch of my metallic black again. Just drop that there. Get this brush. Oh, you should let me know and I'll give you a hand looking for some figures. I know quite a few good shops on it. Well, trustworthy shops on Etsy, or trustworthy figures at least. A lot of them are usually, they've bought a marketing pass for the particular figure type from the maker. Yeah, I'll be streaming for another hour and a half maybe, if not a little longer, and you can just send me a DM then and I'll give you a hand. There we go, that's touched up just around the inner thigh. Hey, if you want to commission me, I don't really take commissions, but if you like how this turns out and you want me to, I'll paint some for you and send them over. Just provide the figure. Cool. Enjoy dinner. And that's the shade done so far for the black armour. Now to work on the nice bright purple cloak. Which, like I said before, I think I'm going to use a black shade on the cloak because it'll help the purple stand out. Now I will go quite heavy on this shade. You know what? I might actually have a purple shade in here. If you give me 1 second to just look. That's not the shade drawer arc. There's my purple shade. Druchii Violet. Now this is a really nice tone. It's a lot darker than what you'd expect. And it goes on quite dark. Don't need a great deal of it. And I certainly don't need it mixing with that brown. So, let's move the pot out of the way again. And let's get working on this shade. Oh yes, you can see that soaking into all that detail already. Leaving nice dark lines. Giving the cloak a bit more dynamism and life. Don't mind me using buzzwords. Not usually one for buzzwords. Run that down the back there just so it touches the edge of the black and the purple. That's still a slight bit too much in there. Come on, work out of that, you little bastard. Don't want it to pool too much. And that is the amount of shade I'm thinking of wanting in that cloak. I can always touch it up and down again once I'm done. But now I'm going to do the interesting bit, turn the figure upside down and do the inside of the cloak. This will be much easier as there's not as much deep detail. There is still a bit of deep detail, just nowhere near as much as there is on the outside. Just need to bring all those crevices to life. And then touch up around the neck there too. Again, just bring it a little bit to life. Make sure the shade runs nice and deep where I want it to run, and nice and shallow where I don't want it to run. And just over the shoulder there on that bit. Cool. And that's the shade on the cloak done. As you can see. Oh, just do the bottom as well. There we go. Now while it will dry a lot lighter than it looks, it should show up the detail just enough for me to highlight and layer. Close that pot, put these two to the side because they're just in the way. Menthol sweet wrapper. That can go in the bin, which is on the other side of the room. Nailed it. Take a quick sip of drink. Hey, thanks Lily, welcome back. Now, I'm going to put this shade brush away, and I'm going to switch down to a slightly smaller brush and go back to the black shade for the sword. Then I've got to switch back to the light brown shade. Well, it's not really a brown, it's a sepia shade. Well, but I suppose that is a brown. And do the copper. Let's run this along the blade like that. It doesn't make a great deal of difference on this, but it is important. Every step of the process is important. Every touch of colour adds a little bit more. How's the Conan house coming along? If you've made any progress. That wasn't meant to be a dig. Miniatures have layers like ogres and onions and cake. Right, now that's all done. Just waiting on some of those shades to dry. Let's get a nice bright silver. Oh god, that's separated really badly. That's going to need a lot of shaking. And yes, I know how this sounds. Better, much better. There we go. This is the brightest silver I've got. Did I clean that brush? No, I didn't. Fun fact, these bristles used to be white. Now let's get a touch of this. Get that there. Nice mithril silver. Which is actually what the colour used to be called before they changed a lot of the paint names. This was called, specifically, Mithril Silver. And as you can see, it's quite an awkward shade. Now what I'm going to do is something a little bit... I'm getting a step ahead of myself. I'm going straight to highlighting without layering. I need to touch up some of the black areas first. No, I need this brush. It's very slightly out of shape. Let's fix that. So would I. That's how I've always thought of it in my head, but unfortunately a lot of fantasy describes it as very bright silver. Well, headcanon can always be slightly different from actual canon. And let's be honest, it's fantasy, it can look however the hell you want. Let's bring up some of the areas of raised detail with the metallic black again. And I promise it'll make sense when the figure's done. Just paint more in the centre, try not to soak into all the deeper recesses. In fact, trying to avoid the deepest recesses as much as possible. A lot of it won't come across very well on camera, but there's not a whole lot I can do about that, unfortunately. This is just to bring up the metallic shine again, because shades, unfortunately, dull down a lot of detail. Because they're a matte finish. So as you can tell, this requires a bit more of a lighter touch than just slapping the colours straight on. Usually what I'll do is just follow the flat panels down from almost all the way, so it leaves that nice area of shade. Just touch the side of the brush to raise details. And leave the nice deepest recesses with that dull dark matte into it. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you like it that much, I've got a coffee, remember? Joking, nobody has to donate to me. Nobody should donate to me. I'm just here for the fun. I don't actually want anybody to donate to me. Please don't. But yeah, I don't know if it'll come up very well on camera, but you can see the areas that are shiny and the areas that are matte. And that's the difference between using a matte shade and layering over the top. Need a touch more paint. Drag it through here very gently. Missing all the deepest recesses again, as I said. Just getting underneath the hand. Now the leg, what I'll do is I'll paint the shape of the armour. Just onto the flat leg panels. And leave a nice wide gap between the pieces that go down. Well, I say nice and wide for this scale. Actually, don't donate to me, really don't. As much as I appreciate it, you've got better things to do with your money. If you want to donate to me, donate to charity instead. Find a cause that you support. I usually go with a wolf sanctuary of some kind. I donate to those on a regular basis. Because wolves are important to the ecosystem. Unlike what a lot of hunters will tell you. They're just coming out of my land and they're killing all my animals. No, they're just trying to survive as much as you are. They've got babies to feed just as well as you do. But I also don't agree with trophy hunting, so there you go. What that wish list do? Don't you dare. I know where you live, Kane. Just touch up those wrinkles on the back of that. Get a nice solid layer over there. And the inside of the thigh. Let's not forget the insides of the thighs. Follow the rim of the boot. Leave that small gap there again. Just follow the gentle slopes of the armour. And where the light would naturally fall, that's where you paint the bright colours. And where the shadow would fall naturally, that's where you leave it. How dare you? I've been betrayed by my friends. 'Tis a betrayal, I say. A betrayal by those closest to me. Oh, there's a little part missing there on the rim of the boot. You know, other than the pauldrons, I think that will do for the armour. Let's just touch those up slightly. Drag the side of the brush over the top of this detail. And drag it gently through. Yes, a betrayal. 'Tis a betrayal, I say. Need a touch more paint on this brush. I thought I'd went in paint then, but I hadn't, thankfully. No painty wrist for me. Oh, excuse me. I haven't drunk anything carbonated for a couple of days, so... Heresy. You dare accuse me, the Emperor's loyal servant, of heresy? You either lost your mind or lost your sense. No, debauchery was yesterday. Do you remember? We played Conan. No debauchery for Lily. You're bored. What about second debauchery? Alright. I know you're trying to distract me while I'm doing this little bit, because you think that I can't pay attention to the chat while I'm doing the fine detail parts. But unfortunately for you, while I'm painting this, the screen that I have propped up just in front of me is right in my eye shot. All I've got to do is very slightly flick my eyes up. And I can see everything. Drag that very dark metallic black just over this bracer again. Well, you could say that, but you'd be pronouncing my name wrong. 'Tis Ark. Cool, and that should do for the black armor highlight. Well, for the layering. Excuse me for taking it out of focus for a second, but I need to take a look at it myself so I can see if there's anything else I need to do. Oh, there's dogs barking in the distance again. Don't know if anybody can hear that. Good God, this chair's uncomfortable. Alright guys, I've been going for about an hour, so what I'm going to do quickly is stand up and stretch. Just because sitting in one position for that long can be quite bad for your back. I just nearly knocked another chair over. So, there we go. Up and standing and doing a stretch. If you want to see a little bit of a difference in my painting skills and a complete beginner, here is a miniature that my ex-girlfriend did. And she was a professional graphic designer. Here is her first miniature. Let's move you out of the way so the camera will focus where I tell it to focus. This was her first miniature. A Primaris Space Marine. She was not a child at the time, she was 28. And here is my first miniature, when I first got into the hobby. I've showed this before, but I've got to have something to talk about while I'm up and standing. Focus, there we go. I've improved a fair bit, I think, from when I've done this to now. Like I've showed this before on stream, but here was then. Focus. See, it listens when you tell it to, and here's a more recent miniature. I didn't have time to do the eyes on it before I finished the competition. Well, before I entered the competition, but yeah, that's the road I've travelled for my journey. Miniature painting. Sorry for that noise. There's a picture that fell over. Right, good to sit down now. I put my figure back where this one should have been. Oh, here's something fun. Here's a big ball. Have my big spiky ball. It's quite a boring looking figure and I didn't fill in all the cracks, but hey. This is actually a spell for the fantasy game Age of Sigmar. I think it's called the Purple Son of Shyish. I don't remember. I haven't actually used it in a game, so don't knock anything over. Cool. Right, now my back's all stretched out and it won't collapse on me. Excuse me, that's leather. Oh, here's an interesting mini actually before I get back to that. There's one I'm yet to paint. It's Illyria if she became a fighter. Or a paladin. More likely a paladin. One of the many figures I've yet to paint. There's another cool one. Yes, you can see some tool marks, but they'll disappear once it's painted. Well, once it's base coated, they'll disappear. Right then, let's get back into it, shall we? There you are. There, good job. Yep, that shade is almost dry on the cloak. There's just one spot waiting, so while that's doing its work, I think I'll start to touch up the gold. So where's my pot of gold? Somebody find me a leprechaun. Now this sounds a little bit worse because I'm shaking up 2 pots of gold at the minute. One is the base reddish gold and the other is a much brighter, just off silver gold that I'll be using for highlights. This is the gold I'll be using for highlights. It's called Liberator Gold. Let's just touch down the old palette, make sure there's no wet paint left that I'll be leaning in. a few little touches of wet paint, but it's all good. Stand you back there, and let's get back to the gold, the good bit, the shiny bit. Oh, look at that, really bright, warm gold. It's a lovely tone. Now then, shall we begin? That big dollop of gold. Work that there, dip the brush in some water, mix it together nicely, rotate your brush, do a couple of little tests to make sure that the colour's coming out nice and smooth, and then we start to touch on the details again. Same as what we did with the armour before, just a little bit more delicately, especially on the face. Just want to very gently touch the brush to the raised or flatter areas, leaving all the deepest recesses nice and dark. Again, just to add a nice touch of contrast. It's very similar to highlighting, but less intense than highlighting. This is where you want to start putting your lines in the right direction. Touching just to the tendrils and pulling down. Running along the length of the cheekbone, around the eye socket, graduating up the length of the horns, on this figure there is only one horn, so it's not completely accurate in Ariax, but it's accurate enough. Go around the back. And like I said, just drag down the length of the tendrils, just brighten them up along the way as you go. Anywhere where the light would hit, that's where you want to hit with the brush. Even on the underside, to be honest. So, disregard that last statement. You want to just brighten up everywhere that wouldn't be a deep recess, basically. I shouldn't really be doing tutorials, I'm not that great. Now for the hands and the knuckles, what you want to do is turn your brush sideways and just run over the top like that. And that'll just catch all the fingers and leave the deep recesses between. Nice and shadowed. For the back of the knuckle, again, just run it across. Pick up any highlights and pointed edges that you may have missed. Just like that. Dry the brush off very gently. Well, wash the brush off gently. And pick up a little bit more paint. Get your brush loaded up nicely, and then pick up the bicep here. Follow the scale pattern. Then follow the bones in the fingers down, because this is a different shape of the hand. of just blocking the back of the palm and the space between the knuckles and the fingers. Well, the fingers and the thumb, I should say. There we go. Now the back of this arm here. Follow the shape of the muscle. Let the brush do all the work. And you should very soon start to see the difference between the gold tones. For example, the head and the tail, which hasn't been done yet. The tail is going to be the big area where you can see all the difference. You know, I don't think I've spoken this much all day. So if my throat seems a little bit, well, dry, that'll be why. Just drag this along the top of these scales. Very gently. Pushing a little bit of paint into the gaps between, but not too far down. And use the side of the brush to just trace down the length of the tail. Just like that. And then do the same for the other side, making sure to catch that raised detail. Remember guys, it's okay if you miss a little bit of the shade and just keep it a little bit dark in some areas. But what you want is the highest ridges and the sharpest points to have the brightest shade. As you can see on the tail now, there's some definite definition between the deepest points and the raised areas, especially when the light hits it. That's going to be a much brighter definition in some spaces than it is in others. Now, just got to do the feet. Or the peats, as Lily calls them. We might actually get Norax finished tonight. If I'm quick about how I paint. Just paint along the toes. Skipping the detail between the toes to keep them that nice dark definition. Along the side, I'm out of frame. Then go along the back of the heel, leaving a small gap between the armour and the heel itself, where the armour would give a natural shade. The fuck was that? That was loud. Whatever it was. And that's the goal brought up. Now, with the coppery tone on the hilt of the sword, I'm going to bring that up to a brass with a colour I don't use very often. called Runelord Brass, which is this tone. Look at that drip. Look at that paint dripping in there. Nice and good. Now let's go back to our layer brush again. Grab a touch of paint. Get it nice and mixed on the palette. There's not a great deal of pigment in this compared to the medium that's in it. And the pigment likes to bunch up. So, to ease that pigment, what we do is we get a touch of water and just help bring them together. And work them on the palette, which is again out of shot because there's a pot of paint there. There's the tone here. Now let's move this paint out of the way again. And touch this to the copper. Won't make a whole lot of difference until it dries, but it will make a difference, I promise. It'll just tone down that bright, rusty, coppery tone. Bring it to a much shinier, polished brass look. It'll still be a much redder tone than I would have liked, but there's not a whole lot I can do about that, other than going back and stripping the figure down completely and starting again. But I don't want to do that because I'm lazy. Cool, that's the brass touched in. It'll just help blend it in with the rest of the figure. Now, for the fun bit, the bit that brings all the colours together. The highlights. Some of them will be quite stark. For example, the purple, which is what I'm going to highlight first. I've gone from a nice warm aubergine purple to a much brighter and paler, almost lilac. Almost lilac. And it's a very thick paint, so this will need a lot of work. As you can see, it's a very thick paint. Now, when you're working on highlights, what you usually want to do is thin your paint down a little bit more than you usually would, so it flows a lot smoother off the brush. Because the better your flow of your paint is, the better it flows off the brush onto the miniature. That should do. Let's give it a little test. Yeah, that'll do. Nice and smooth. Now for this, I'm going to switch down to the 000. I'm just going to drag a little bit of the paint onto these bristles and just start very gently picking out the sharpest edges and maybe smudging it a little bit with my finger. Anywhere where the light would catch. You just want to very gently run the paint over the sharp edge. This will dry slightly darker than it looks on the figure at the minute. But not a whole lot darker. It'll still provide that nice bright tone that we need. I don't know how well it shows up on camera, but it should just make it look like the light's hitting the edge of the cloth. And I think my eyes are starting to go a little bit funny from focusing so hard on this very small area. Touch it very gently to the edge there. It's a little bit too much paint. You want to be very careful with how much paint you've got on your brush for highlighting. Because too much and you're layering instead. And layering's not what we want to be doing right now. And this is, again, just the opposite of shading. Giving definition where there was none. Some of my techniques might seem a little bit odd to some people because I use the edge of the brush a lot rather than the very tip. But sometimes you can catch the edges better with the side of the brush than instead of using the tips. It's not always the obvious answer. As in painting as it is in life. Sometimes the obvious answer is just that, too obvious. I just need to drag a very thin line along here. Just to catch the highlight where the sun would hit the cloak. Sometimes you can't help and you have to use the tip of the brush. But a lot of the time, you can just use the edge, which is one of my preferred methods. Now, it should come out a little bit better, as you can see where the light hits it. It just brings the detail to a nice fine point.